Welcome back. This is session 2 of our learning community titled Insights from Lived Experiences, Enhancing Excellence in Provider Care. We want to just let you know again as a reminder that RMTAC is a national resource center offering training and technical assistance to behavioral health professionals, organizations, and agencies serving or preparing to serve newcomers, including refugees and migrants across the United States and all of its territories. We offer support in the form of these learning communities. We offer them in coaching sessions and in webinars. If you're interested at all, please visit our website. You can submit a request through that link and we will get some time scheduled with you. We are really thrilled that you're here with us. We also want to offer a gentle reminder. We really need your feedback on how you feel about these learning communities. This is a really important part of the grant that we receive from SAMHSA. The information that you all provide to us regarding these learning communities are how they know that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So if you were here last time and have feedback for us for session 1, please feel free to take the survey now. The link will be dropped in the chat. We will also be providing the link at the end of our time together for today's session, so please fill that one out as well. We really appreciate your attention to this. My name is Danielle Bill, and I'm a part-time clinical consultant here at RMTAC. I've been a behavioral health service provider in many facets and across various contexts since 1998. I truly have a heart of service for people who live in the margins of our society. So I'm thrilled to be able to host this series. I love these deep, intimate conversations as I find that they always bring an opportunity to engage in meaningful self-reflection, which I like to call heart work. Here's our agenda today again for your reference. You can read it here. Today, we're going to be hearing about our panelists' post-migration challenges and all that that entails. We will be discussing systems of support and building community. And then finally, we will discuss how our panelists overcame those challenges. We hope that by hearing the lived experiences of these incredible women, that you all can support your own communities as service providers. As always, as the conversation gets more deeply intimate and personal, if you need to take a break, please feel free to step away as needed. Last time, there were a lot of tears and emotions as we spoke together, so please take care of yourself as needed. Now I'm going to introduce our subject matter experts. So due to unforeseen circumstances, Dr. Garcini will not be with us today. I'm going to be offering what she shared with us a couple weeks ago, and we're going to continue our discussion with Dr. Mutsa and Mrs. Diana. This will affect our time frame, and we may be ending earlier, just as an FYI. And as a reminder, here are some of our panelists. So last time, Dr. Luz Garcini shared that she is from Mexico City. She migrated here as a young mother of 2 small children. She traveled without her partner and had to renounce her citizenship as a Mexican. She loved her country greatly and struggled to understand the cultural norms of America. She also talked about how hard it was to honor her children's excitement while she contended with her own anger. Dr. Mutsa Majero was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and she's lived in the U.S. for the past 21 years. She joins RMTAC as our lead clinical consultant for the team. Last time we gathered, she talked about needing to flee her country as a 16-year-old. Fortunately, she had an older sister who was a source of home in America, but struggled to form her new identity. She recounts feeling an overwhelming sense of grief as she contended with her new reality. And then we have Diana Romero. She's a learning and development coordinator at RMTAC. Diana was 9 when her family left Bosnia due to religious persecution. She viewed her transition here as an adventure while also having a keen understanding of how hard it was on the rest of her family. As a result, she wanted to help dissipate any stress by being as good of a little girl as she could. When she looks back on that time, she contended with substantial fear. Each of our panelists use their lived experiences to inform their work, and similar to myself, who's had to navigate debilitating trauma, this is what makes a good clinician lead and serve with heart. not always necessarily a formal education. I'm so happy that I've been offered this space to sit with each of them as they continue to share their stories with us. So thank you again to you, Dr. Moots, and you, Mrs. Diana, for being here with us again today. We also want to say thank you to our producers, Teresa Quintana and Sonia Rollins. They are working hard behind the scenes to ensure that everything runs as smoothly as it can, and they also let me know when I've accidentally muted myself and you guys can't hear me. If you have any technical issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to either of them via chat. I also want you to know that when we break out in sessions, you'll be grouped with other wonderful members of our consulting team, Esther, Luz, and Dr. T. To remind us where we left off, here's a recap of the discussion that we had a couple weeks ago. We heard from each of our panelists, and they talked about their pre-migration journey and how they navigated that transition. Again, Diana was a 9-year-old little girl, and she viewed her journey as an adventure, although she was very scared. She talked about support coming from other refugees and migrants in her new apartment complex. Dr. Garcini was in her early 20s and had 2 small babies. She expressed intense anger at her circumstances, and she found support with other migrant families, especially with other parents who understood her unique circumstances. And then we had Dr. Mutsa, who was 16 years old and remembered grieving her old life. She was able to find support in the form of an informal community networks with other Africans. In today's session, we're going to center on listening to the lived experiences of Mrs. Diana and Dr. Mutsa. They're going to share with us their personal journeys. They're going to offer us insight into those experiences and how they shape their identities and their current worldviews. Again, the reason why this topic is so important is because we want to examine the long-term challenges faced by refugees and migrants, and we want to help them identify areas where provider care can be improved based on those lived experiences. We also want to develop actionable strategies or recommendations for enhancing provider care informed by the insights shared during this session. I said it last time, and I'm going to say it again because I think it's really important. We really want to be intentional about centering the lived experiences of each of our participants. As they shared, and they will continue to share today, their personal journeys, they're going to offer us insight into how those experiences shape their identities and worldviews. When we recognize lived experiences as a form of qualitative data, this data can be used to understand how best to support refugees and migrants. I came to deeply appreciate the value of this data during my own dissertation process, as the type of understanding I sought could not be fully captured through numbers or traditional quantitative analysis. Storytelling is such a powerful tool through which communities of the global majority can pass down knowledge, preserve their legacies, and connect with each other across generations. Yet, within the dominant framework of American culture, these narratives are often overlooked and lost. Documenting and sharing lived experiences as these not only foster collective healing, but also plays a crucial role in disrupting intergenerational trauma. Again, we're going to ask you to listen with kindness, ask thoughtful questions, and help us to create a space where we can explore how to navigate challenges in your own provider care. So we're going to start by asking some questions to our panelists, and we're really going to focus on coping with adverse experiences of migration. So to start us off, I'm going to ask, in thinking about developing resilience through adverse experiences, what are some of the long-term challenges of migration? So I don't know which one of you want to start us off, but what were some of the long-term challenges that you all currently face as a result of migration? Things to consider might be how you process trauma, right? Specifically identifying what adverse experiences were, maybe how you establish stability. And when we're talking about stability, specifically, we're talking about emotional stability, financial stability, and/or housing stability.
I can go ahead and start. Thank you, Dr. Danielle. I think I would say one of the long-term challenges of migration, as you speak about stability, is um, establishing it doesn't happen all at once, right? Whether that's emotional, financial, professional, or housing related. And just thinking about like my personal journey after the initial move, there's like an ongoing process of still just like having to find your footing. A lot of times as an immigrant, it feels like you're starting from scratch. No matter what you've built before, once you land here, you're essentially starting from scratch. For my parents, just thinking about my parents, who had been established in their careers, the abrupt movement meant that they had to essentially start over in so many ways. They lost hard-earned pensions, professional recognition, and just that comfort of like being in a familiar space that they knew how to navigate, right? So that professional reestablishment, I think, is tough for many immigrants. And just thinking about myself being 16 at that time, I felt like I was starting over too, having to navigate new systems, new social norms. And I feel like a lot of times I was viewed through a deficit lens, right? So like being from Zimbabwe meant I had less to offer and needed to kind of like prove myself. So that unspoken pressure to like catch up socially and culturally was exhausting. And I think it still even pops up in many ways for me now when I introduce myself as being someone from Zimbabwe. I think there also one of the lingering um like long-term challenges is that aspect of feeling kind of in between cultures, recognizing that there's that part of me that when I do travel home, sometimes I'm viewed as not fully Zimbabwean enough. And then when I'm here, the part of me that's been, raised here in the US sometimes doesn't feel, in a sense, American enough or something along those lines. Um, and then also just the hurdles of like continuing to have to think about your legal status. You have to renew visas. You've got to work towards permanent residency. And then for some citizenship applications, it's almost like an ongoing issue. And even once you have whatever status feels somewhat secure, there's just always things going on in in the world, in the political space that just makes it feel a little bit rocky. Or like you feel like you aren't fully settled. So those are some of the challenges that come to mind. I'll let Diana also chime in.
Thank you, Dr. Mutsa. I feel like you put so many of those kind of at the forefront of my mind and reminded me of them. Because I think, we're not oftentimes reflecting on this on our on our daily lives of like, what are those things? But a big one that I'm thinking about for my family specifically is that reciprocity of career, right? Like both of my parents had established careers, like you mentioned, before they came to the US. My dad, he's been a mechanic and he was like a lead technician for the state there. And my mom also had a career in agriculture and she helped lots of farmers in the area develop like different farming techniques. Well, when she came to the US, she didn't really necessarily know how to transition into that role here. And my dad, now he actually does work for the state as a technician, as a mechanic, but that didn't happen right away. That took probably more than 10 years for my parents to even settle into that. And my mom never returned to her previous role, which she had a degree in. So that I feel like is a big one for my family. And I think another one that you mentioned is the stability doesn't actually happen that easily. And it always feels like you're reestablishing some kind of footing in your life. I know for my family, stability is just something that we've just recently felt a little bit more grounded in. And I think that came when my son was born, I think for us, because we never really felt rooted in this country until there was somebody born in this country. And my son was the first person in our family that was born here. So once he was born, I think that kind of anchored our family to this being our home. It kind of set the foundation of like, this is where our family is growing and expanding. And I will also echo what Dr. Muta said, that in between cultures is always present. I know when I go back to Bosnia, I'm the American girl, and then when I'm in the US, I'm the Bosnian girl, and there's like a hard time of trying to figure out how to mesh those two identities and accept both parts of myself while also seeing the value of the different cultures and what they bring. So I think that's definitely difficult. And I think lastly, something that I want to add is like processing that trauma doesn't necessarily happen easily, right? For a lot of us, I mean, processing trauma as a whole is difficult. So imagine when you're trying to kind of stabilize your home environment, you're trying to integrate into a culture where you don't really know the language. I know for my parents, they still struggle with speaking English, especially my dad, since he kind of works like in an area where he doesn't get a lot of human interaction in his job. So trying to find that place of when is the time to kind of unravel that experience, that migration experience, doesn't really come naturally, and it takes a really long time. And for my particular family, that's looked very different. But I feel like until you can establish that stability, until you can feel deeply rooted into the culture, that processing the trauma can't happen. And I think that's a thing that a lot of migrants carry with them is that trauma, and they don't necessarily have the opportunity to get to a place of stability to be able to unravel that. So I think those are a couple of the things that came to mind for me.
It's really eye-opening, and both of what you two shared is this idea of this theme of being enough, and where I don't have the lived experience of being a migrant. I am first generation. My mom was born in Spain. She was of Mexican heritage. And my dad is African American. And so growing up in America and having to juggle these two identities and wondering where I fit in, I can resonate with this theme of being enough. As I'm considering this, I think, and as I'm thinking about stability, it really matters that there is a sense of emotional stability, but that can be so hard to come by when you're suddenly rooted in a place where you don't have any roots or any foundation. Then if you don't have that, then I can see how hard it would be then to go secure a job, right? Especially if English isn't your first language. What does housing look like? What are the demographics surrounded? What are the areas that you have access to, right? And this leads me into thinking about privilege, right? And coming to America, and this idea that we just pick ourselves up by the bootstraps, and we, kind of make it work, but there's so many barriers. And so thank you for kind of shedding light on even this idea surrounding your parents working really hard to obtain this in your own country and then coming here and literally being stripped of all of that. So thank you. If either of you could change something about your journey, what would it be? If you could.
I can go ahead. I think because I was so young, there was so many unknowns for me. I didn't really understand the complexities of what was going on, yet I didn't really have anybody telling me what was going on. And I think that's something that I wish I would have had, or maybe just even just like some kind of support with other kids that maybe went through what I went through, and we could play together. I don't know. We didn't have to talk about anything, but just knowing that I had somebody that went through what I went through and kind of understood, or just somebody explaining to me what was going on. I just felt like I didn't know what was all happening, and I didn't know how to ask those questions because I was so young. so I think that's something like I just didn't feel like I had a lot of support as a kid during that process. And I know that my parents were going through so much trying to navigate that process. And they oftentimes leaned on me, right, to fill out paperwork, to translate things for them, to even now, like I help my parents do all their paperwork and do their bills and navigate all that still to this day. I think having some kind of support in that way would have been really, really helpful for me.
Do you think, Diana, if you would have had that you would have processed the trauma of your experience differently? I mean, I know it's hard to think like in this magical way, but that's what I'm struck with is do you think that would have helped your processing?
I think it would have just given me more of a foundation to feel like everything was not out of control. Like, and maybe that's something that translates into older versions of myself, but I feel like there's always this feeling like everything's really out of my control and I can't like grasp that. So maybe if I had somebody when I was younger kind of make me feel like I had some autonomy or some power in the situation, I think that could have translated to maybe more of a sense of belonging here in the US.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dr. Mutsa?
Yeah, I think I have some similar thoughts to Diana. Part of me almost wants to be like, "Oh, I wouldn't change anything because, it's all of this kind of like led to me being who I am now. And those experiences, I think, have really like shaped who I am now. But when I look back through my, maybe 16-year-old lens, I think in the first session I talked a lot about how community was like really helpful for me, and I didn't really find the type of support that I think would have been helpful in professional spaces. That's what I wish would maybe have looked a little different. So it's kind of similar to what Diane is saying in terms of just for the support that was there, the formal support that was there to have kind of maybe looked um, a little bit different. It would have been ideal to kind of go into some of the spaces that we had to go to receive, some of the like aid that we were getting for people to maybe look like us or just kind of have an awareness of what we were going through. It was a lot. It was really difficult to navigate some of those professional spaces because it just didn't feel very personal. It was just like someone just getting through their day and just like pushing you through the system without really taking time to understand what you really needed, what really would have been helpful. And we found more of that in community spaces. So I think, looking through my 16-year-old lens, that's what I feel like, okay, that could have really helped the journey feel like I felt like I had to grow up a lot faster. I had to lose my Zimbabwean accent a lot quicker to just kind of adjust and fit into the system. Whereas, there's a lot of times where I wish I hadn't lost some of those parts of myself.
You just provided a really, I think, tangible example of what it would feel like to constantly feel like you're in a deficit, right? When you have these barriers in front of you and you can't access resources that you need and you can't access even things that you want, through that example, it feels like it would be easy to kind of understand always just feeling like you're in a deficit.
Right. Yeah. Very true.
If I could
Um,
add something to that, I think that like feeling of belonging is something that a lot of refugees and migrants continue to deal with. And I know personally from my experiences, I feel like I'm always yearning to feel like I belong in some way, like to prove that I belong in this space. And I know that happens a lot with any kind of like minority groups or women where it's like you have to continually show that like I belong in this space. Like I am worthy. And I don't know if that comes from the immigrant experience, but I know that that's like a really universal feeling of continually having to show, like, yes, I'm capable of this. And yes, like take me seriously. And yes, I belong in this space. So I just want to echo that's a feeling that comes up quite a bit.
And I wonder, I don't think that the experience is unique to migrants. I think it's unique to people who are forced to live in the margins, right? So I think the similarities across circumstances are the same, and it's really the global majority who's been forced to kind of fit into the margins of society that don't fit the American framework. And that's, such a good point. I think as we're all sitting here listening, even though I don't have lived experiences as a migrant, I know exactly what you're talking about, having to kind of live in these borders. And that can be quite challenging to then establish a sense of autonomy and a sense of assertiveness and a sense of like, I do belong, and almost demanding it, because if you don't, then you're just going to kind of continue to be pushed. I recognize that this too is in fact privilege. So that leads me to kind of wondering about like, how do you develop a sense of autonomy, which then establishes your voice, which then establishes courage to kind of stand up and take up space in a space where you don't feel like you belong?
I can go first. I think for me personally, this is still a process, and
Mhm.
I'm not 100% there in any capacity. I just even my experience of working here at RMTAC and serving these populations and sharing those experiences and learning about trauma informed care, learning about cultural humility, learning about those things has actually helped me find my own voice because it's made me reflect on my own experiences and see, wow, there is so much value to what I went through, and there is value to that other part of my identity. And I have to be completely honest, for a big part of my life, I hid that part of myself. I refused to be a part of a lot of cultural things because I didn't want to identify with my culture. Because a lot of times when I did identify with my culture, I was bullied, I was shamed, I was, not accepted. And so I would say until maybe like the last year or two, I did that for the majority of my life. I didn't talk about where I was from unless somebody asked me directly, or I just tried to not be a part of my culture as much as possible. So that process is happening for me actively, and it's happening here in this learning community. And it is kind of like a reclaiming of that part of myself. And it's something that I'm still working on and navigating at this present moment. So,
Yeah, I want to acknowledge that, you and I were touching base after the last learning community, and I hadn't realized that this is one of the first times that you had fully sort of walked into telling your story. And I was sharing kind of the bravery that it takes to kind of just open up your mouth, even through tears and even through shaky voice, how empowering and how brave it is to really just start to say the words that make up what you experience. So thank you for highlighting that. Dr.
Yeah.
Mutsa.
Yeah, I appreciate that there is a space like this right now for like what Diane is saying, to kind of be able to find your voice and embrace who you are. Because like I noted earlier, I felt the need to quickly hide the Zimbabwean part of me, to quickly lose my accent, to quickly just kind of fit in. This was 20 something years ago where being African wasn't cool, right? And it came with a lot of questions. And for me, it was harder to like hide, because my name, just the minute I say my name, people are going to start to ask where I'm from. And I think as I've just kind of grown, I think I've noted this before, that I'm thankful for the Zimbabwean community. I mean, it's unfortunate what was going on in Zimbabwe that led a lot of people to leave the country, but it's also kind of the places where I've lived has had a pretty strong Zimbabwean community, and that has kind of helped me stay rooted in who I am. And I think Zimbabweans in general are just like known as like being really hardworking people who just persevere and push through. So I've been able to see others in my community achieve really great things. And that's kind of helped me be like, okay, I can do it. I can pursue. I can, I don't have to. It took time. It wasn't until like college and beyond that I felt like I could fully embrace who I was, and I didn't necessarily have to hide those certain parts of who I was. But I think, again, it had a lot to do with community. It had a lot to do with the people I was surrounded by. But I think if I had stayed in little old Lansing, Michigan, I think it would have looked a lot different, where that space of continuing to want to like hide certain aspects of me would have been there, because there was a Zimbabwean community, but not as large as some of the other places I've lived.
Yeah, I share this a little bit because again, it resonates when I did my research on um healing through trauma and lived experiences. Really, community was the thing that was the protective factor, which astounded me, even though I knew it through my own experiences, talking with so many people and then going back to having a community that they could lean into really supported their healing process. So something that resonated with me last time you spoke, Diana, was how excited you were to have access to American food after experiencing food insecurities in your home country. You also shared that much of your family support came from fellow refugees and migrants in your apartment complex. They generously donated furniture and toys and helped you all settle in. As a little girl, you often felt lonely and confused, especially due to language barriers. You recall not knowing how to ask how to use the restroom at school and resorting to standing uncomfortably until the teacher understood how to help you. You talked about a turning point coming for you when you were paired with another student from your home country who helped you adjust. Your parents relied on resources from Catholic charities and other organizations to help teach them job skills and navigate their new life in the US. And Dr. Garcini talked about the moment that she knew that the transition was real when she was forced to sign over citizenship in her native country. She also found that support through family outreach organizations and connections with other migrant families, especially fellow parents who understood her struggles, helped her during that time. She committed to weekly phone calls using calling cards, which became a cherished lifeline for her. It offered emotional reassurance despite financial limitations. Being surrounded by others who shared her language and cultural background helped her reconnect with her sense of identity and pride, which carried her through the challenges that she had in her early years in the US. And then, Dr. Mutsa, you realized that your migration journey kind of became real when you watched your mother handle that paperwork associated with entry into the US. You also shared with us that the most meaningful support that you received came from an informal community networks rather than professional services. Your family was welcomed by strong Zimbabwean community in Lansing, Michigan, along with other African immigrants and church members who helped with essentials like transportation and winter clothing. I remember you talking about the jacket that you had that wasn't well suited for the winters in Michigan. You also talked about professional spaces such as schools and government offices feeling emotionally distant and filled with assumptions. Seeing others who look like you and who were thriving gave you hope and a sense of possibility here as you navigated life in the US. So as we're talking, right, about these themes of belonging and community, I'm a huge advocate of fostering community. So I want to ask you both, since you have arrived here, I imagine now, and Diana, you talked about that just recently when you had your baby, that you felt like you were at home and that you know were kind of rooted, and you've each have since found a sense of belonging. What actually occurred along the way that helped shape some of these feelings of home and belonging? How did you find your own footing in this place? If you could share other examples that come up for each of you.
I think you were like, I'll go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Um, I think one of the turning points for me was actually in college. When I joined the African Student Association, being surrounded by other African students, it really kind of helped create some sort of sense of just like familiarity and comfort that I kind of missed. I think I spoke about how at the time that I moved from Zimbabwe, I was in boarding school. So I was like living and growing up with my best friends. And it felt really kind of just disorienting to be uprooted from that space. And in college, I kind of feel like I found that community space again in joining, clubs like the African Student Association and some other organizations, where we could just kind of I didn't have to explain myself. I could just be, it was really more than just like a social group. It was really a space that just kind of felt like home. It's one of those things that looking back at it now, belonging isn't necessarily a place or whatever. It's just that connection and having that community. It was really pivotal for me because I really distinctly remember before college crying to my siblings saying, I don't have friends. I just don't feel like I have my people aside from family. And that changed a lot for me in college, just being in some of those spaces.
Diana, did you have anything else to add? I know you talked about having your baby, and was there anything else that really solidified community and belonging for you?
I think for me, I'm still in the process of that, like
Yeah.
building community, but I will say that returning to my family core has really helped
Mm.
me personally. Because my family kind of struggled to integrate into the US and had their own challenges while they were here. I think there was a lot of feelings of disconnection between us. And getting to reconnect and share our individuals' experiences and talking about those, even with my sister, even though she was a baby, or my mom or my dad, kind of having those conversations again has helped process some of that and like create that sense of belonging. But also separate from my identity as a refugee, joining different moms groups has
Yeah.
really been helpful for me because a big part of my life has been, adjusting to being a mom and kind of stepping into that role. So those mom groups help support me a lot through postpartum. And so that made me feel a good sense of belonging. And I also teach yoga. I'm a certified yoga teacher. So the yoga community and integrating into that and finding support with other yoga instructors and especially yoga instructors that have a trauma-informed lens
Yeah.
has been really helpful for me. So not that I've necessarily found that belonging through the refugee community yet. Hopefully soon and eventually I will get to that place. But these other groups that I felt like seen for the different parts of myself has been helpful for me in fostering that belonging.
Yeah, and what each of you shared is so brilliant, and that each of you had to accept new identities, which again, when I think about my own experiences, it wasn't until I went off to college for the first time, and fortunately or unfortunately, whichever day we're talking about, I got pregnant my first semester in undergrad, and so I had to accept this new identity of being a mom and a first generation college student. But in both of those identities that were very different than what I experienced before, I learned to find myself. I learned to kind of establish who I was, and it sounds like it was the same sort of process that you really had to accept. Maybe if you weren't thinking about it before, but now you're suddenly here faced with these new identities that you're having to learn how to navigate through, really helped you feel like you could establish some roots in where you were currently being planted. I never thought about it in that way. So thank you for bringing to light and kind of giving us that perspective. So we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit, give you all time to kind of breathe. We're going to move into some breakout sessions. And here we're just want to create an opportunity to learn from and share the expertise and experience from everyone here. So the producers are working to kind of get everyone into their rooms. You're going to have a facilitator and they're going to guide your group. And at the end of that discussion, each group will identify a speaker to share on behalf of the larger group when we reconvene. And we just want you to briefly share a few points that you discussed in that discussion. Who wants to go first?
Our group can go first.
Thank you,
We
Dr.
didn't,
T.
yeah, we didn't get an opportunity to like choose a spokesperson, so I'm going to be the spokesperson. But one of the strategies that our team talked about, well, they talked about all the services that their different organizations provide, including funding, transportation, housing, medical assistance, food and shelter. But they talked about one of the strategies they talked about that was really good was utilizing peer support and having peers help one another so to build community. I summarized it. Those weren't exact words.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. T.
So, one member of our group shared kind of a success story about a women's group that they had together, that people from the same country were able to join in these groups, and then people that were maybe older or had been in the United States for longer could kind of serve as mentors and coaches for the younger, newer ladies in the group. We also talked about connecting families that have the same differences, whether it be having a child with disabilities or anything like that, to kind of have families have a partner through that. And we talked about utilizing various different kinds of groups, like sports groups and church and moms groups and all kinds of things like that, to facilitate belonging in different parts of your identity.
Very good. Thank you, Erin.
Hi, our group can go. We were group 2. So some of the things that we discussed was having like empathy and understanding, and just realizing that not all of our experiences are the same. So kind of just having that empathy to just hear people out and their stories. We also discussed resources at schools, and just seeing how like limited things are. And if there's more resources in the school, we feel like that would definitely be beneficial in transitions and making people feel more belonging. Um, and then I believe the previous group said something similar to this, which was just like connecting with others who have had like the same experience. So kind of like opening their eyes to like real people that they can connect with, that have like success stories, so that they have like a glimmer of hope to, look forward to.
Yeah. I think that point specifically validates why we're here and kind of talking about lived experiences, because it can create a touch point for someone else to reach out and have access to. Thank you, Brittany.
Can I add one more thing just based on that
Yes.
discussion? What the last speaker mentioned, how, when you connect with somebody, or you have an opportunity to share a little bit about your experience, it can encourage somebody else. I attended a conference, I think it was like a few months ago, where they had two Bosnian refugees sharing their experience, and sharing a little bit about like how they integrated their migration experience. And they shared a little bit about, them being children, because a couple of them were children when they came, and they shared some of the things that they went through when they were navigating that, like helping their parents fill out paperwork
Yeah.
or any of that. And just having that person talking about their experience doing that really helped validate my experience, and did encourage me to want to share my experience as well. So I think that was a really great point that the speaker had mentioned, because I think it can kind of create this trickle effect of
Yeah.
like opening up one person's opportunity to share and then inspiring somebody else, and it helps create this environment of openness. So
What a beautiful example, Diana. That's absolutely, I think it encourages us to be able to, like how we were talking earlier, to like just open our voice and kind of say like, me too, or I see you. I think it's so critical, and again validates the importance of this qualitative data in storytelling. So thank you.
And I think providers can do that, right? We all
Yeah,
have these stories that
yeah,
we've kind of carried with us. So even just opening a little bit and when they are working with a client, maybe say, I've experienced that as well, and I
yeah,
understand. That can be really, really helpful.
yeah. Thank you. Okay, kind of moving us back into um, our hearing from our panelists. Something that really, again, another theme, I'm kind of big on just finding themes and kind of sitting in those, in that processing of those themes is resiliency. And resiliency is something that I needed to learn and didn't know that I had when I survived my own lived experiences. It absolutely was not easy, but I'm really grateful now for the wisdom and the muscle that I gained to endure what I did. Last time, Dr. Garcini said something really, really powerful that stuck with me that I wanted to highlight again in today's session. She said, as it related to how she supports her own clients, she has to remind them often and continually to remember the strength that carried you. You have survived 100% of your hardest days. And when she said that, I got chills all over my body because that is absolutely true, right? A lot of the people that we're serving have survived 100% of their hardest days. And so for you, Dr. Mootson, you, Diana, and thinking about how you've gained resilience and if you even identify yourself as being resilient, um, let's shift into kind of processing how you overcome these challenges. So how has your migration experience impacted your life in terms of career, the passions that you developed that were different than those of your childhood, the family that you're cultivating here in America, and your overall health?
When I think in terms of how my migration experiences impacted me uh, professionally, I think my lived experiences definitely motivate me to contribute to spaces kind of like this that support newcomers. Um, I think I kind of always knew I would be in some sort of a helping profession. My dad tells the story of how I wrote him a card when I was like 8 or something and told him he could always come and talk to me if he needed someone to talk to. So I think I've always kind of wanted to be in this type of a space, but definitely having moved, that migration experience kind of fueled a passion for me to be in this role, kind of like I am in now at RMTAC, where we advocate for compassionate care and, kind of help to bridge some of those gaps between providers and immigrant communities. And I know for myself as a provider, I take a lot of pride in the fact that individuals actually seek me out as a therapist because of my lived experience, right? Because they know that they're going to be with someone who kind of gets what they're experiencing. I can't say I truly know exactly what they are feeling, but I have that experience and have that idea. And so even on days where I may be, just exhausted and tired, coming out of a session where a client kind of just expresses that they feel seen and understood, it rejuvenates me and kind of makes me feel like, okay, this is why the work that we do matters. Um, and then more like personally, I think it's helped deepen my appreciation for family and again, community, like I've talked about. It's made me also just more intentional about prioritizing my own mental health and emotional health, and recognizing that, like, healing is ongoing. It's not like you get to a place where you say, I have fully healed. Like it's an ongoing process. Um, and I think I'm very intentional about creating some of these spaces where we can come together as immigrants. For example, my cousins and I, we had a talk show where we highlighted immigrant stories and successes. I've also written a children's book that shares like what it's like to move as a child. We've hosted there was an event we hosted called African Summer Soiree, where we encourage women to dress in African attire and kind of just participate in just a sense of community and empowerment sessions that helped us kind of feel like, okay, we can thrive in these environments. So it's definitely like pushed me into those spaces where I want to uplift voices. I want to foster connection, and community essentially. So I think it's definitely like essential to the core of like who I am now.
Diana.
I just love hearing from you, Dr. Mutsa, because you make me remember all these things that were kind of like in the background. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm remembering it. For me, I'm just thinking a lot of the people that made a major impact on me were teachers, and they inspired me to to just to be somebody, right? To do something. They oftentimes said they had a lot of faith in me. They encouraged me to pursue education because I was always really passionate about education in school. I loved being in school. I was one of those kids. Um, I loved going to school. I loved learning. So I've always had this like very strong sense of learning, and my parents always encouraged me to pursue an education, especially since that wasn't as readily available where I was from. So I think a big part of my identity as a person, as a whole, was centered around education and wanting to make an impact in that way. And I know some of you have heard, but I did spend the last 10 years working in academia with students in the college level. So a lot of those students coming in, I wanted to be that person for them. I wanted to be the person that like encouraged them, gave them that strength, kind of help them see themselves as powerful and strong and resilient, and offer that support because I felt like I didn't have that support. So I really wanted to offer that to others. And same with sharing my story. I feel like I want to do that because I know that there are other people like me that need to hear my story, and I know I needed to hear those stories. So wanting to be that person for others, and it's interesting that both of us kind of have that helper, like we want to take what we've experienced, and which hasn't always been the greatest, right? There's been challenges, there's been difficulties, but being able to put those aside for the good of others, I think is a reoccurring theme, and something that I'm incredibly passionate about and I think helps me. And personally, I think it does, like Dr. Grassini had mentioned in the previous session, when you've gone through so many points of adversity and difficult things in life, it does create a sense of you can handle what's coming next. You know, you can overcome what's going to come at you. And I know in childhood, I had a lot of trauma that happened growing up, right? And in adulthood too, I've overcome a lot of adversity. And kind of knowing that I have that, I overcame this thing, so I can overcome whatever the next thing is coming. That feeling is really helpful and hopefully encouraging to others, but it helps get me through those difficult situations. So
Thank you, both of you. It's absolutely incredible to kind of hear that those adverse experiences lead you to sitting across from someone else. I think in my own practice as a trained clinical psychologist, it's taboo to disclose, right? We're supposed to have this separation between therapist and or provider and client. And in the 30 years that I've been kind of functioning in this helper role, I always found it uniquely like gratifying to me to be human first, right? To not kind of fit in this box that's been dictated and say, I see you as a human. And I think that experience comes through in each of your words, and that I just want the other person sitting across from me to feel seen, to be valued, to feel like they're held, right? To create a touch point that lets you know that you're not alone. I always say that before I had words and I could articulate what I was trying to say, I had feelings. That was my first language, emotions. And so making people feel empowered, making them feel seen, making them feel like they have a voice, I think is critical to our work as service providers. And if another person can feel that way, and if there's just a little ounce of empowerment that they feel, then they can continue and take that next step in a very arduous journey. So thank you to each of you for sharing those words and creating space for us service, the rest of us service providers to kind of be intentional about how we're making the other people feel sitting across from us. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your hearts and sharing with us today. I, again, am just deeply honored that I get to sit in the midst of this discussion with each of you. I know all too well the vulnerability that comes up with sharing our stories. I wholly believe that when we do share, that people often get to see the glory, the resilience, the here and now, but they rarely truly know the deep, daunting, intimate parts. So thank you for sharing these glimpses of your tender parts. I am most certainly better for hearing them. Thank you for your time, hearts, and vulnerability. In talking about kind of our session summary and takeaways, we really learned from the lived experiences. We learned about what life was like in each of our panelists' countries of origin and what it was like to embark on the journey, and then what actually took place in their journey. And today specifically, what they learned from that journey and how it shapes how they're continuing to live the rest of their lives. We really talked deeply and intimately about how to foster resiliency, belonging, and community. And really, I think a theme that stood out was just identifying different parts of a person's intersection and really trying to create touch points there. And then finally, how do we collaborate and share strategies so that people can feel like there is a touch point for them? Those are the things that really stood out in today's session. And again, gives us an opportunity to reflect on how we can be better service providers to our communities. Some closing reminders is please take our survey. Again, we are funded through SAMHSA, and they need this feedback to continue to provide support to us so that we can continue to provide these learning communities for you all. The next steps is that please utilize the resources that we've provided in our slide deck. You'll get access to that and stay connected for future meetings, topics, and continue to collaborate with each other and with us for support and service provision. As you continue to process the discussion that we had today, just continue to engage in self-reflection and reach out to any one of us should you need any additional resources post-session. We're here to help. Here is our website. I will drop it in the chat. Don't hesitate to reach out. As a reminder, some of the services we provide are interactive online learning modules, consultation and technical assistance requests. We offer a resource library. We have a services directory. We offer these learning communities, and we have national helpful resources listed on our websites, and we offer newsletters. I see that there's a question that I want to see if we can try to get answered. The question is I had last time was just understanding how you best support patients in the current political climate with those fearing deportation. I can't remember if it was I think it was Dr. Mutsa who said that often a barrier to feeling stabilized is any kind of shift or adjustment in political climate. Was that you that said that today, Dr. Mutsa?
It was.
Do you want to expand on that question a little bit?
Yes. Let me look at the question again.
It is understanding how you can best support patients in the current political climate with those fearing deportation.
That's a really important question and a very tender topic right now, right? And I think some of what we've talked about in this session in terms of just creating space for people to process that fear is really important. Having a place that feels like a supportive environment in a world that just feels like really rocky can just kind of be the first step in letting people know that they're not alone in that fear, right? Sometimes just having someone say, yes, I can understand, and I can feel that pain too, can be really grounding. I think on a more like practical level, connecting individuals with like local immigrant rights organizations, what's the term I'm looking for? Legal aid clinics. A lot of legal aid clinics offer free or low cost services. So people are kind of educated on what their rights are, what to do if they're approached by immigration authorities. Um, and then also maybe thinking about having emergency plans, like some sort of like safety plans in place. I think having that information can also just feel like, a lot of times just having a plan can eliminate fear. It can help people feel like they have a little bit of control in a space that doesn't feel like it. And us as providers, we can feel helpless a lot of times in those spaces, but just advocating, just being allies in that space for immigrant clients is really helpful. Um, and making sure that the services that we're offering, the conversations we're having, the support we're extending doesn't re-traumatize clients, right? Making sure that you yourselves are also just like culturally aware and have some of those resources on hand to be able to point people in the right direction, I think can be helpful too. But it's a tough question to answer because we know that it's a tough environment that we're currently in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to that point about feeling instability in the face of not having control, I think adds to the complexity of being able to answer that question as confidently as we can in this sensitive time. So thank you for that, Dr. Mutsa.
If I could just add one thing, I think the fact that
Please.
the question already shows that you're thinking about your clients from a very informed way, and you're taking into consideration what they might be feeling at this time. So I think just considering that, like the how much the instability can be affecting your clients, and having that awareness as you go into those interactions is really important, and you're already doing that, and you're taking the time to learn and to hear that. I think that's already a step in the right direction. It already shows that you are a support. So knowing that there is instability and then creating a possibility of safety with that, I think is really important. And something that I had thought of is, maybe offering virtual meetings with your clients during this time, because they might be fearful of leaving their homes. So helping to establish those safe environments in a virtual environment might be helpful, as well as somebody that had kind of an experience with that.
Thank you for that, Diana. Thank you again for your attendance. We know that you could have been anywhere else. We appreciate your time and attention. Thank you to our panelists. And should you need anything whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our email is going to be on the slide here in a moment. And we look forward to hearing from you should you need anything. Have a wonderful day, and thank you again.